So Capitol Hill Democrats are discussing the removal of Debbie Wasserman Schultz as a chair of the Democratic National Committee over perceived bias. And in the case of this story, you should consider the phrase perceived bias to mean bias. That might help you understand what's happening a little better. Her relationship with Bernie Sanders has gotten so bad that she's no longer even watching Curb Your Enthusiasm, which I think is a real, it's a real sign that things have broken. The sad part is that I don't know whether you know this, Cenk, but when two Jews fight, a tree in Haifa dies.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
okay, that is news to me. Okay.
Our information here.
Haifa's in a world of hurt these days. Okay.
By the way, when making a joke about an Israeli city, Haifa, the funniest by far.
And if you're making jokes about German cities, obviously Dusseldorf.
Obviously Dusseldorf.
Stuttgart is not bad, but it's a distant second to Dusseldorf.
Dusseldorf. Okay. This information we have here from The Hill reporting today, Democrats backing the likely presumptive nominee Hillary Clinton. The worry that Debbie Wasserman Schultz has become too divisive. Capitol Hill, Democrats on Capitol Hill discussing whether Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz should step down as the DNC chairwoman before the party's national convention coming up, obviously, this summer in July. Continuing, there have been a lot of meetings over the last 48 hours about what color plate do we deliver Debbie Wasserman Schultz's head on? That information from a Democratic lawmaker. Continuing here, we have another Democratic lawmaker saying, I don't see how she can continue to the election. How can she go to the convention? Sanders supporters would go nuts, says that lawmaker. More information here. There is no indication that Wasserman Schultz, who's also a Florida congresswoman, has any plans, though, to leave her post. Senate sources stress a final decision won't be made until Clinton and Sanders negotiate some type of deal aimed at healing the party. Now, one thing interesting that has happened that I was eager to get your reaction, this is from this story in The Hill, Cenk, that a sentence here says the Clinton and Sanders campaign have already struck a deal, you may have covered it, with Wasserman Schultz to limit her role in making the convention platform. She was able to name all 15 members of the platform. Instead, she picked 4. 6 were picked by the Clinton campaign and 5 by the Sanders campaign. I read sentences like that and think, well, that's deal making. Mm-hmm. That's a deal that says, yeah, you've won. I came a close second. You picked 6. I picked 5.
Yeah. Well, at this point, that's clearly the situation at hand. But we were told that Bernie Sanders is not pragmatic and can't make deals. Well, he just made that deal. Okay. You might be surprised by my opinion on the heart of this story. I kind of feel bad for Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And now I'm in the camp that I think she was enormously biased throughout when she was trying to schedule all the debates in the least watched times on television. It was apparent which side she was on. And then we've had many controversies since then, obviously, including, well, gee, I couldn't tell which side the DNC was on when they basically did money laundering on behalf of Hillary Clinton and moved all of her donors to become state Democratic donors and DNC donors and then funneled all the money back to Hillary Clinton. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out which side they were on. But I feel like if you were that loyal to Hillary Clinton, now to serve your head on a platter, it actually irks me in 1.5 ways. The one way is I'm a guy who believes in loyalty. I feel like, boy, she was so loyal to Hillary Clinton. Now for the Clinton allies to screw her over seems particularly cruel. I know that's an ironic opinion for me to have. So, look, that's the core of my issue.
Well, you know, it's interesting because there's a line in this story from The Hill. It says, still, Clinton is known for valuing loyalty, and pushing Wasserman Schultz out could signal weakness. And remember that, of course, Wasserman Schultz endorsed Clinton over Obama back in 2008. That goes to your point. That's obviously relevant here, is that she would have to force her friend out. Now, you would think it's not quite forcing your friend out. She isn't being sent to Siberia. She doesn't have to give up sex and serve on the wall. It's not quite that kind of. I'm sure she could still have she could turn around and be like, hey, and by the way, then you'll be Secretary of Labor. You know, I mean, there's plenty
also
of
ironic.
Yeah, there's plenty of ways to reward her, and at some point, Wasserman Schultz, you would think, would understand the politics of it.
Well, that's exactly right. So, look, this is the beginning of the deal making, not the end of the deal making. So if they feel like, hey, you know what, Debbie, you got to go under these situations, can't have it, or we're going to do party unity and the Sanders people are too mad at you, but don't sweat it because if and when I win, you're going to get something, right? And we don't know what that something is, but I would be really surprised if she didn't get something in return for all this loyalty, which actually separates her, Hillary Clinton, from Barack Obama. I know through stories that have been in the press and not in the press that Barack Obama does not favor loyalty that much. If he feels it is slightly to his advantage, you will find yourself on the underside of a bus so quick you won't know what hit you. And by the way, the guy who makes the ultimate decision on who the head of the DNC is Barack Obama.
Yeah, and which is why Bernie Sanders said in very clear terms when he announced that he was supporting her primary opponent, who, by the way, is constantly referred to in the press as her primary opponent. I literally don't even know his name.
It's Tim Canova. I know because Jordan Sheridan interviewed him. But yes.
But Sanders said, "I will be if I'm elected president, you'll be removed as head of the DNC."
Yeah. So, but okay, now here comes the other half of why I object to this move that would be largely symbolic, which is that it's largely symbolic. It's not like if you removed Debbie Wasserman Schultz and you put in another establishment person to run the DNC, that anything has changed materially. All you got was a little vengeance. You got a little for the watch, right? But that doesn't really do anybody any good. So if they replace her with Cory Booker, as an example, right? If Hillary Clinton decides she's not going to pick him as the VP, he's a super establishment candidate. They put him in, but he's African American, and people, what? We picked an African American guy. You liberals are still complaining, right? It'll have that kind of appearance, but in reality, he'll go and he is great at raising money from Wall Street. So it'll be just the same as we had it before. On the other hand, let's pick an outlandish example, but someone who's actually on the committee now, platform committee because of those Sanders seats, Cornel West. If they were like, okay, the new head of the DNC is brother Cornel West, then we go, okay, now that's real.
Yeah,
okay.
That's not going to happen.
No, it's not. No, but look.
On hair alone.
But look, so what is quote unquote realistic? Could you pick a Raul Grijalva to be the head of the DNC? Theoretically, you could, but they're not going to. And that's why this move is symbolic and largely meaningless. I don't care that much about the vengeance.
Well, neither do I. I don't care at all about vengeance, but I do disagree with and I frequently disagree with your assessment of symbols. Sometimes symbols are very important. And if, Jeff Weaver was on Hardball, I can't remember who the host is, Chris Matthews. Jeff Weaver was on Hardball this week and talked about, when he'd slip into sometimes talking about it as if the campaign is over, like as if the chances of winning is over, like what the plan is, what the Sanders people want. And they want meaningful change down the road. Meaningful change down the road for the Democratic Party would mean people unlike Debbie Wasserman Schultz being in charge. This could be the first step toward that. I don't think it is as unimportant as you say.
Yeah, look, I could be wrong about the reaction of Sanders supporters, but my sense of it is one of the anonymous lawmakers here talking about the platter of
what color plate to deliver her head on.
Right, now I can't say Debbie Wasserman Schultz without thinking of Jimmy Dore imitating Bernie Sanders, going, Debbie Wasserman Schultz! Okay, anyway, that lawmaker says that young liberals might be more enthusiastic about the Hillary Clinton ticket if Debbie Wasserman Schultz is replaced. And that's just not how I see it. I think Sanders supporters are Sanders supporters because they care about the policy. And so the idea that don't worry, you got a political, goodie here. In the old days, they would have asked Bernie Sanders, what position are you looking for in a Clinton campaign, to rally the troops, et cetera. No, but when I asked him, when I interviewed him here, that didn't even come close to, he didn't come close to mentioning it. He talked about the minimum wage and income inequality and all the policy positions he wants. So my guess is that those young progressives at the DNC who will be at the convention, they want policy differences. They don't think in the old ways of we defeated a political opponent, but now there's a new one that thinks the same thing. We win.
I know,
but
you're really looking at it. Yes, I agree. If it's in a complete vacuum, but if it's part of Sanders getting some of what he wants, it's a pretty big symbol to suggest that you threw out a crony and replaced him with someone who's going to be more equitable. The solution obviously is in, or we find out the answer to that in how equitable that person actually is,
Right.
and how equitable that person is perceived. Very quickly, to wrap up the sentiment, though, while these were all unnamed lawmakers and aides in this Hill story, the people who were named were supportive of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and that includes Joe Biden. But jumping forward here to graphic 7 on this, Barbara Mikulski, I think Debbie Wasserman Schultz, she said, has done a good job. If you look at her platform committee appointments, she really gave a lot of room to Bernie supporters. Continuing with graphic 8, Bill Nelson, about removing Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Nelson says that's just not going to happen. I certainly wouldn't let it happen.
Yeah, good luck.
So anyway, I think that's all. It could be worthwhile, but again, you're right. It depends completely on who that person is.
But one quick note on how to read these political stories. The people who are defending those in power will say it publicly, right? The ones who are planning the coup will not say it publicly because they don't want to be known as the ones plotting against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. So the ones that are on the record are not necessarily more legitimate or you should give more credence to. Oftentimes, unfortunately, in these type of political stories, the ones that are anonymous actually are the ones that are actually determining things. And the others just go out in public and go, no, we're with Debbie. And oftentimes they mean it, but it doesn't mean that they're the ones who are going to get to make that decision.
Yeah, I think the most important part of the story is reading between the lines. First, that deal struck between the Sanders and Clinton people and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and now the notion that this story again gets into the Hill, unless the Hill has been duped in this story, which I doubt very seriously. These are serious, high-level conversations, regardless of Bill Nelson or Barbara Mikulski or a Joe Biden aide being willing to go on the record. And Biden's support was tepid, like, yeah, I support the chairwoman of the party. Great. It doesn't mean, I'll support the next one if this one gets removed. And obviously, the big arbiter here, one would presume, is President Obama, whose influence probably pretty big in this situation.
Yeah.
So I think the mere fact that it's being discussed and it's getting traction is a sign that those who are craving party unity are no longer just saying, when is Bernie Sanders going to give us party unity? But acknowledging that party unity is going to have to come with moves by the winning camp to appeal to Sanders people. It doesn't mean they're going to do it successfully, but it means they're aware that that has to happen.
Okay, that's it. See, now when you're talking about symbolism, that's important symbolism. Like when the establishment camp goes, okay, sorry, you guys are right. We have to move a little in your direction. I don't think this is necessarily the right way to do it, but although I'm sure a lot of people would disagree with me, but the very fact that they're willing to move is a good indication. And one more thing about how these stories play out in the press. If it's in the press, that's not a mistake. The reason that it's in the press oftentimes is because it's a trial balloon. So they want to see how it goes. So they float that out there and see if there's big pushback or only a little bit of pushback. And if there's only a little bit of pushback, they're like, okay, off she goes.